Well, there it is, Visual Studio 2022 IDE, Integrated Development Environment, using C#. A lot of stuff on there, a lot of stuff. How do we use it all? It's going to take some time, I think, to get used to this thing. Let's take a look. Hey there, welcome to Programming in Any Language. My name is Daryl, and I'm going to take you on a little trip towards looking at the designer today, the Visual Studio Designer. I think when you first start programming, you end up with these IDEs, integrated development environments. It can be kind of intimidating because there's so much there, and you think you have to learn it all. In fact, when I teach classes in programming, it's kind of sad that you've got to go through a week or two of basically learning the environment before you can actually get into coding. So it's kind of like taking two classes in one. You almost should have a class on just the designer and then worry about getting into the code piece on this thing. So we're going to take a look at that today. I'm going to start out right now by bringing up Visual Studio. I've got that sitting right here, and we'll pop that in, and up it pops here. And what we're going to take a look at is I'm going to create a brand new project. And I'm going to call this thing Windows Forms app and .NET Network. And I'm just going to say next to this thing. It's C#, as you can see here. So I'll say next to that thing. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it, let's call it Learning the Designer. And I'm going to go ahead and navigate to a folder where it might be, and I got it in video projects there. I'm going to put it right in that thing, so I'm just going to select that folder. Actually, this one I want, yeah, video projects is fine. I'll select this folder and I'll say create, and that'll put that thing out there. We can take a look at what it's going to create when we get in there. As soon as we do that, as a matter of fact, as soon as we do that, we end up with a folder, and I'm just going to bring it over here. I've got it sitting off on the side there that looks like this. It's got Learning the Designer in it. And just that simple act of trying to create this thing has created a folder with some stuff in it, solution file, and this. And this thing has a bin, object, property, a whole bunch of stuff in it that we're going to be looking at later. So I'm going to move this off the side. We'll check it out in a bit. My system comes up. I have multiple monitors, and this could happen to you if you have multiple monitors as well. Is you end up with this scaling in your main display set to 200%. Restart the Visual Studio to set it to 100% scale. I'm going to go ahead and do that. While that's happening, the reason for that is the two larger monitors I have in front of my desktop right now have a different resolution than the laptop I've got sitting here. So Visual Studio gets confused and wonders what you should do. So I bring it up, but I restart it at 100% design. And then what I can do is I can kind of move this over, and I can size my form. So we're looking at the designer right now. And this designer, basically, if we look at it, we're looking at the application's form. This thing is what you're going to see on the screen when you run your app. If I start it right now, compile it, it's going to compile a program, and it's going to run, and we're going to see this pop up. Form 1, nothing on it, because we didn't design anything on it, but this is our form. And notice the size of it. It's exactly the same size as my design that I've got sitting right here. It's almost a square shape, maybe slightly rectangular. We want to look at this and get an idea. With the form itself can be modified. You can go ahead and change it like this. Notice it has little squares on the side. That means it has the focus, and that means I can make changes to it. I'm going to get rid of the output window here so you can see more of this as we look around here. So this kind of gives me an idea of where I'm going to put my applications. It's the canvas, so to speak, if you were doing a painting. Once this thing has the form, there is something called the properties window, which I have sitting over here. These are the properties that can be changed on this thing that affect the look of this particular form. This is an object, and it has things that can be changed to customize it to your will, how you want it. And right away we can see that there's a text area here for saying Form 1. I can change that to, let's call it, what did I say, learning the designer. I'll just put that out there, hit enter on it, And now, as you can see, it changed the look on this thing. If I run my program, it now says that up on the form up here. So it directly affects what you're going to be seeing on here. There's a bunch of things. If I put this focus on here, and I'm going to minimize this again and bring this down a little bit so we can see more. There's a lot of things you can actually do. You can change the background color on this particular thing. You can do all kinds of stuff with this particular thing. Another thing you can do with the canvas, the form, is you can add controls to it. And that's what this toolbox is all about. This toolbox, if you can't find it, by the way, if it's gone, you can simply go to the View menu and look for Toolbox, click on it, and up it pops. And right now it's sitting with all common controls. I can close that down, look at all controls, see on there. But common controls are pretty much what I want right now, so I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to put a button on the form. I'm going to double click on it, and the button appears on the form. It allows you to drag it down here. Now notice it has the little bars on it. It's got the focus. So all the properties that are associated in this properties window belong to this button. If I go and click on the form, that changes. The properties are now the form's properties. But I'll click on the button and I'll make some changes here. For one thing, I want to call this thing, Click Me. We'll call it. Click Me is what I'm going to put in the button itself. So you can see that right here. It changed that text property right away. I'd like you to see it a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the font area. And I'm going to change it to bold, although it knows it's false. I'll click at the true. And I'll change that size right here to maybe a 12. And click on it. Now it doesn't show me everything that says click me on it, so I'll go ahead and highlight it again and I'll extend it. You can also do that by simply changing the location where it is on the form. Notice that changes as I do this. You can also change the size of the form right here. If I want to change the 125 and make it even 50, I can just put a 0 there and hit enter, and you'll see a slight change in how that actually looks. So you can change it here and there. These are properties that are associated with this particular form. So that's how that thing works. And I can give it a background color, much like you can do the form itself. If I want to give it a background color, notice they're all in alphabetical order, all these properties. I can go to a back color, click on it. It gives me a custom web and a system design coloring feature. I picked the custom one right here. Let's give it a nice pale blue and pop it in there, or green or whatever that thing is, and pop that in. So now it has a color on it, so it looks kind of decent. That's how you add a form to it. And you can add a label if you'd like. I grab this particular label. Instead of going ahead and double clicking on it this time, I'm going to take the label. I'm going to click on it, hold the control key down, and bring it over. And that allows me to bring the label up to the right here on the form itself. It now has the focus. You see a little square up on the side here. The interesting thing about the label, it is an auto size. Is true on here. That means that it's going to change no matter what the content is in there. It's going to change to accept that content. So in my text area, I'm going to simply say hello. And hit enter there, and hello pops up in here. Now I'm going to change that. I'm going to change this to say the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog's back. And hit enter there, and notice how the label changed size. It got very, very large. This is great if you're creating things. I did want to label 2 on here, so I'll click that off there. Just move this around here, and I can adjust it. I don't really want that in here, and I'd like to actually make it something that I could size myself. So I'm going to go back up to this auto size property, and I'm going to change that to false. That allows me to set the font here, make it a certain size. So now it's much smaller than it had been before, as we can see. I can change that myself if I want. Or what I could do is I could click on the Click Me button, hold my control key down, and click on the label button, and go up here and say Format, make same size, both. It's going to make the same size as the one that's got the white coloring on there, the white dots instead of the black dots. And now the label is the same size as the Click Me button. I can even align them up by doing this, align their centers, and then I can also format them so that they're centered on the form horizontally and vertically. That puts them right smack in the middle there. Now I'm going to take this guy right here, and I want to change it. It doesn't have a nice. It's sized nicely, but I would like to give it a background. So I'm going to go to the back border style and click on this. And I've got a choice of, it's got none right now. Fix single, which looks like that, or I can give it a fix 3D, which kind of gives it a depression like it's carved in stone. And I'm also going to change the font to bold, and I'm changing the size to 12. Hit enter, and I'm going to jump down here to my text align property and say I'd like this thing centered. Put it in the middle. So I'm doing that. And I'm also going to get rid of all this text. I can do that by dropping this down, highlighting it all, and hitting the delete button. And now it's gone. And you can see it's empty. And you can kind of see that 3D quality it's got right now. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to hit start. And we can see what our program looks like so far. It's got a blue button here that clicks. It's got a label in here that stuff could go into. It's got this changed. It's coming along. It's looking very decent. This is our canvas. This allows us to go ahead and kind of shape things up before we ever do any programming. We get our look and feel of our program, what it's actually going to look like to the user that we're creating this for. One of the things about this, you want to, before you go into code and start programming anything, you want to name these things. I did put things in there in the text field, but I didn't name the object itself. And I'd like to do that with a click me button. If I go over to my solution, or my properties, you'll see it's called button 1. If I put another button out there, it becomes button 2. It kind of just does that for you. You get these multiple buttons on here. I'm going to get rid of this one. I really don't want a second button there, so I'll just delete it. I go to my click me button, and I'd like to change it to something I can refer to it in code. So I'm going to call this BTN for button. I'm going to use Hungarian notation, which is a naming convention I use. And I'm going to call it click me. Now, what's going to happen is that I've named that, so now I can use it when I program this thing. It'll actually say button click me in code, and that's how I can reference it. It makes more sense than saying button 1, because as you get more and more objects on your code, you start doing longer and longer programs, you're going to wonder what does button 1, button 2, and button 3 do? What does label 1, label 2, and label 3 do? What do I need them for? Better to give them a name that makes some sense to you, like click me, or execute, or for a label, grand total, percentage, things of that nature. It'll all make kind of sense. I'm using Hungarian notation, which is, we'll cover that down the road in another session, but it's basically using a 3-letter prefix to my objects and then a name that's descriptive after that thing, like LBL grand total, LBL percentage, BTN for button click me, BTN exit, something of that nature. You could also use just camel casing, where you might say click me button, grand total label, things of that nature. The thing about that, it shows up in your code, and you can make easy changes to it. Which one should you marry? It doesn't really matter too much. When you're working for a company, they're going to have their own shop standards on how you're supposed to name things, and they'll dictate to you what they may like. They may like camel case notation, and you may be doing that. You may quit your job after 2 years and get another job at another company, and that shop standard may be Hungarian notation. You'll be able to switch. You'll be able to do it. Why do you have to do it like that? Shops generally have the same kind of coding conventions, so that other programs that people are doing in that shop can be read by other programmers. They don't have to try and figure out, what did you mean by this? What does button 627 mean? That makes no sense to me. And then if it says button execute or button click, you have an idea of what the thing does, and you can learn very quickly what it happens to do. So that's why we have the naming conventions go on there. Let's move on a little bit and look at our code. And one thing I want to show you was the Solution Explorer. We look at let's get rid of this output file here, and look at this thing on the bottom called the Solution Explorer. When you create your application, you get this thing here, and it's got all kinds of junk on it. What is all this junk? Well, if we go back to our folder, let's bring that on the page here. When we created this application, we ended up creating a folder. And I'll just go up one. And it became Learning the Designer, became my folder. Okay, if we go into it, it contains a solution file called Learning the Designer. And you could actually click on this to bring up a Visual Studio. It would work. And you got this folder, Learning the Designer. If I click into this, it's got bin, object, properties, and a bunch of other stuff. If you look closely, Form 1 ResX, Form 1 ResX, Form 1 Designer CS, Form 1 Designer CS, Program CS, Program CS, App Config, App Config. There's properties in here. Go into that, go a little deeper. It's got other things, the resources. It's got what you might have in here. So what's happening is everything you're doing with this object that you're creating, this application you're creating, is going to be sitting on disk someplace in a folder, along with a solution file. The Solution Explorer kind of gives you a shortcut way to get at this thing. Let me move this off to the side. The Solution Explorer is a way you can get at things. For example, if my form is not showing, let's click on this thing, get rid of it. I'm going to save it. I'll save everything so we don't have it. There's no form there. What do? I can actually click on the Form 1 CS, right-click on it, and you get View Code, View Designer. I can view the designer. It brings up my form. I can also right-click on it and bring up the code. By doing that, it brings up the code that's taken place so far as we've created this. I haven't done any coding, but Visual Studio has. It's created a bunch of using statements so I can make use of these in my program. It's given me a namespace called Learning the Designer, which my entire application will be built under. It's given me a class, a form class right here. And inside the class are methods that are going to execute and make work. One of them is initialize component. That allows this thing to actually start and do this. It actually brings the form because the initialize component is there. If it wasn't there, comment this out and run it now. And we get this. There's no learning. It's just kind of a blank form with nothing really on there that says anything. So this initialize components does initialize your form and brings in all of the pieces that you've done so far. I don't need this output button at all. I'll just kind of move. I should move it off the side. I could do that if I wanted to. What I want to see now is basically let's go ahead and create some other methods. We gave the button a name. We're not going to give the label a name. It has done right now other than label 1. That can be used, but it doesn't make much sense. It does if it said, like, if we had another label up here, say let's put a label up here and call this label, and we'll just say in here, output window in our text. Output label, we'll call it, and we'll go ahead and size it. Give it a bold, and maybe give it a 12 also, so it looks like everything else. We could set this thing right above this form. Let's make it the same size as this too. We'll make it the same width by doing a format, and I'll make same size width. That didn't really. Oh, it didn't work right because we need to center it. That's what we need to do. I don't have the. I don't have it auto sized. Auto size is false on this guy, as you can see. Also, it's true, I should say. It's auto size true. So it's going to be whatever's inside here. And that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to say format, and I want to say align their centers. And that puts it in the middle, so it looks kind of nice right above that thing, like that. So in a case like this, I don't need to change the output name because I'm not going to refer to this in code anymore. It's simply a label that tells my user what this is down below. But this guy right here, I am going to put stuff in it, so I'm going to need a name change for it. Yes, I could leave it as label 1, but it doesn't make a lot of sense in code. So I'm going to call this my LBL output. And do that. Now it's got a name that I can refer to in code. Now I'd like to actually write something in code. So what I'm going to do is we already have this form1 initialized as a method inside our class, in our form class. By double clicking on the click me window, it's going to create another piece of code called button click me. I click. It's using that name that I referred to, that I created the button to be, and it sets up an ellipse, top and bottom, a starting one and an ending one, and that allows me to put code in between here. What I'd like to say right now, what I want to do when I click on that button is I want to say LBL. It gives me a start, and it says, looks, the IntelliSense piece of this thing, which is kind of like on your phone when you've got that thing that always tries to correct your spelling and usually does it wrong. This one in IntelliSense gives you a chance to look at all the different things that begin with LBL. And I only have one right now, LBL output. So I'm going to grab that, and that looks great for me. I can click on it, or I can tab, whatever I want. I'll click on it and hit tab, and it finishes it off for me. Now I'd like to put something in there, but I'm going to have to put it in the text property of LBL output. Notice I've still got an error in this thing by this little syntax thingy there. And I'll hit text. There's text. And I'll say that's equal to, and I'm going to say, hi there, everybody. And we're almost set to go. What it's allowed me to do is allow me to actually create a method here for the click event, which is all inside the class. So we've got the namespace, we've got a class, and within the class we've got all the methods that are going to take place during that form. I've got an error in this thing right now. If I go ahead and save this and hit start, it says there are build errors. Would you like to continue to run the last successful build? No, I don't. I have an error. I need to fix that error first. So I turn that off. I don't want the output thing here, but I do want what's called an error window. So I'll do the view here and bring down the error list, and it'll pop up on the bottom. And it says a semicolon was expected in the project Learning the Designer, Form1 CS, in line 22. Line 22. Oh yeah, I missed a semicolon over here. So pop a semicolon on there, and now the error goes away. The error down here goes away. I can now go ahead and save all and run the form, and it will work. Comes up, output labels there. I can click on it, and bang, hello there, everybody, pops up on my screen. Nice and centered and multi-lined on here inside this particular label. So that worked just fine. So you've got IntelliSense that helps you type on this thing. You've got all the different properties that you can use. If you happen to click on the designer piece and click on a label, whatever has the focus, giving the focus the form, the button, now the label's got the focus. These properties change there, and you can use those for all those particular pieces that you're working with and make changes to it. There's a lot of them. You don't have to learn them all. In fact, that's the intimidating piece about the IDE. There's so much there, you think you have to learn it all. You'd go crazy trying to learn it all at once. You can just learn what you need to know now so you can jump into coding. Right now, you're learning how to paint on the canvas. So you're learning how to use a couple of colors on your palette and make that thing work. You know, drawing a square, maybe stuff like that on your paint. Now what we'd like to do is basically look a little bit more at this code here by going to our code window. And what other things can we do here to make this thing look better? Well, one thing I like to do is I like to put in comments. So I might put in a double slash here and say, this will update the label. So I'm just leaving information. I can't even spell label right. This will give us information about what this particular routine does. Another thing I might like to do is maybe go up here on the top and say, I'd like to have a block comment in here. So I'll hit enter on there, and I'll put in a slash asterisk. Everything turns green, as you can see. Everything's a comment right now. But I'm going to hit enter on this thing, and I'm going to say program. And I'm going to call this thing Learning the Designer. And I'm going to say date. And I'm going to say, September 7th, 2022. And I'll say the programmer. I'll use my name on here. And I'll say, and I'm going to say purpose. And this program shows us some of the things, step it out of it, you can do when working with the designer. And now I'm going to backspace, and I'm going to slash here to close this comment up, because right now everything is a comment in this program. Hit a slash here, everything comes back to regular code. You can see the blues and the blacks are popping in here, and this is called a block comment. The compiler is going to totally ignore this when it actually compiles, and you can go ahead and run your program. A line comment is something like we have down here, where simply you're putting in an informational line so that other people can understand what this label does. Yeah, it's kind of obvious what this label does, what this routine does here, but when your programs get more complex, it does get kind of important to put in some kind of a notation there as to what it does. Even for yourself, I can't tell you the number of times I've written a program and put it aside for 6 months, went on to other projects, things of that nature, and had to come back to this program that I wrote 6 months before, make some changes to it. And I'll look at it and say, who the heck wrote this code? This is ugly. Because you're always kind of changing and enhancing things and learning different techniques. And you'd be surprised at some of the stuff that will embarrass yourself that you did in the long run as you get better and better at these things. So commenting helps you understand what that routine does when you go back to it. And of course, anybody coming into your program who's going to look at it for the first time is going to really appreciate the fact that there's some code there. Don't become a novelist. There's no reason to write paragraphs of what each routine does. Just put something straightforward. A programmer can look at the code and kind of figure out what the code does as long as he's got a clue as to what he's looking at. This is part of a heading of a form. This is the body of a form. This is going to be, this is a routine for reading some records. That's all you need to say. You don't have to go into specifics of what it all does. The programmer or yourself will go in there and look at the code and say, oh, it opened this file and it's got this thing. It's bringing in first name, last name, middle initial, stuff like that. So that all makes sense to you as you do this. So that's what comments do. Another thing that's nice is to close a form. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and double click on a button again and bring one down here. And I'm going to call this button, I'm going to say exit. To make it look like all of the other buttons on here, I'll kind of change the font on here so it matches. So I'll give it a bold, and I'll give it a 12. And then I'll resize it so the exit can actually be seen on here. And I'll just put it in a nice spot down here like it is, and I've got it here. But I also want to rename this thing in code so I can find it. It's going to be the exit button. So let's call it BTN EXIT. And hit enter there. Now I can click on it, and it'll create another event. So it'll do that for me. There's my event. I'm going to move this off to the side so we can see more of this code. And I'm going to sit in here, and I'm going to do a comment. Close the form. And then I'm going to write the code that's going to close the form. This dot close. Gives me some help. IntelliSense does. I'll hit semicolon there. It's all set now. This will actually close the form. So now I've written all of this code so far. I've got my name, the comments, all that kind of stuff. Identifier in each method as to what the methods do. By the way, I can shrink these down if I don't want to see one. If my code is getting too complex, I can kind of get rid of what I've already done by hitting these $- to turn them into pluses. And you can see the ellipse means of the code down here. Then I can just concentrate on one particular routine. I might want to concentrate on this routine. Maybe I like to put a message box in here. So right before this thing, I'll put in a message box and say MESSAGE. Well, here's message box right here. I can grab this guy and do a message box show, and I can put in the label is about to get updated. And put a period in there. and a semicolon again because we got an error. Gotta finish our sentences with a semicolon. Now we've got a message box in here that's going to tell me that it's going to do something before it actually updates the label. And my exit button is here. And the exit button, remember, I'm only looking at this, look at the private void, but if I open it up, I've got more code down here. So this helps. Okay, I can see what I've actually got. I'm going to save this. I'm going to run it. My program comes up. Output label's up there. Click me is there. I'm going to click on the click me, and it comes up with a message box saying this label is about to get updated. So a message box can be used to kind of inform your user as what's going to take place. And there's different kinds of exit buttons or message boxes. You can have things that say OK or cancel or things of that nature. This one's just an OK, just an informative thing. You're about to see something. OK, I'll click on OK, and hi there, everybody pops up in my output label. I want to close my form. I'll click on the exit button, and it goes away. Nothing's there anymore. So that's basically it. So we've looked at how this Canvas works. We've seen a bunch of things up here. We haven't covered most of them. We have not covered, and you don't need to. As you get to needing these things, they'll pop up, and we'll discover these as we go along. There's no need to learn them all right now and just confuse the issue when you're going to learn how to code shortly. As far as the controls go, we don't need to learn all the controls, just the ones we're going to be using right now. As we have the need for doing a grid, we'll pick up the grid and figure out how it works. What we need to do is use what else we have here? There's other things in this thing. The dialog box. We need to learn how to use a open file dialog box. We'll learn it at that time when we have to actually create things like this, the open file dialog that's going to pop up for. We'll be able to do that. So our code's going to look very, very nice when we get done with this kind of stuff. So we look at syntax here, we look at closing the form, we looked at comments, we looked at the IntelliSense, how it helps you code. It's that little thing that, it's like your phone, and other things on there. So basically, this is how you use the Canvas and the integrated development environment to create programs. Yes, there's a lot of stuff here. Don't worry if you don't know them all. It's all going to come in the long run. But I think you'll find that now that you've got an idea here, you now can kind of sit back and play with this a little bit, put some forms on it, try to create a small piece of code that has different forms, try some of the objects on there that you can put on there, see what it does, get a feel for it, get a comfort for it. And next session, we'll jump into doing a little bit of coding and making this stuff work. So that's going to become second nature to you as you go on. So I hope you have some time to play with this kind of stuff, and I think you'll enjoy it. So we'll talk to you in the next session. So you guys take care, and we'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.